Imagine waking up as a Dallas fan and realizing that the biggest gamble in the franchise's recent history went completely wrong. Not long ago, the team decided to give up a generational point guard, a superstar who dictated the direction of the team every single night, to bet all its chips on a superstar big man, but one marked by a long history of injuries. It was the classic now or never move. The message was clear. Dallas no longer wanted to build slowly, it wanted to shorten the path to a title. But the plan fell apart far too quickly. On paper, the idea was simple. Bring in a defensive monster, someone capable of dominating the paint on both ends of the floor, to turn the Mavericks into an immediate contender. The problem is that basketball is not played on paper. Between constant trips to the medical staff, performances below expectations, and chemistry that never truly clicked, the experiment turned into a burden. Instead of getting closer to the top of the West, Dallas found itself sinking in the standings, piling up losses, frustration, and questions. The atmosphere inside the organization went sour. Fans grew impatient. The media turned up the pressure, and behind the scenes, the feeling was that the franchise's big move had backfired badly. Confidence in the project began to crumble, and when that happens, someone has to pay the price. It did not take long for the impact to go beyond the court. The executive responsible for signing off on that bold bet ended up fired. The message was harsh. This was not a small mistake, and the cost would be high. Arriving at the current season with a disastrous start to the campaign, with few wins and many losses, Dallas finds itself facing an inevitable choice. Either keep insisting on something that has already shown it does not work, or finally turn the page for good. And it is exactly at this point that the name Anthony Davis returns to the center of the conversation, but now in a different way. No longer as a savior, but as an outgoing piece in a total overhaul. Away from the court on many nights, because of the same injuries that scared other teams in the past, the big man stopped being a solution and became a problem. Not because of his talent, which nobody questions, but because of his lack of availability. A roster that is already struggling cannot afford to have its main investment watching games from the bench, in a suit, unable to contribute. The patience ran out. And when patience runs out, bold trades start to appear. It was in this context that a proposal surfaced that shook everyone, a package involving Dallas and Golden State. On one side, the Texans would get rid of Davis's heavy contract and his physical instability. On the other, the California team would receive yet another star to try to squeeze every last drop out of its title window around its legendary point guard and the perimeter star who recently arrived to share the spotlight. This is not just any move. It is the kind that can redraw the power map of the conference. The structure of the trade is intriguing. The Mavericks would receive an explosive forward, still young, full of athletic upside, who has long been seen as a diamond in the rough and who, in an environment with more minutes, could finally turn into a leading star. Alongside him would come a veteran who was the face of the Warriors' defense for more than a decade, an emotional leader, controversial, but extremely intelligent tactically. To complete the package, a specialist in three-point shooting, capable of spacing the floor and punishing any defense that hesitates, plus a future first-round pick, crucial for a rebuild. On the other side of the table, Golden State would receive Anthony Davis and a young point guard still trying to cement his place in the league, but with the energy and hunger to fight for minutes. In practice, the Californians would be betting that the big man, in a more structured environment and with a lighter offensive load, could rediscover his best form, especially in the moments when it matters most. The playoffs, decisive series, games in which a block, an offensive rebound, or a sequence of dominant possessions in the paint change everything. For Dallas, however, this deal represents something much bigger than simply getting rid of a player who did not work out. It is the official symbol of the beginning of the Cooper Flag era. The rookie, treated as a phenomenon since a very young age, is seen as the new face of the franchise, a player capable of redefining the team's style with his versatility. He is not just a scorer, he is a wing who does a bit of everything. He guards multiple positions, reads the game with maturity, and has a competitive mindset that is rare for someone so young. Next to this rookie, envisioning a more unleashed Kuminga, without the constant shadow of veterans trying to save the season year after year, means opening space for a duo of wings who are extremely athletic, aggressive, and with a huge growth ceiling. With a long-distance shooting specialist stretching the defense and a battle-tested veteran to guide the group on and off the court, Dallas's identity becomes something else. Out goes the pressure of winning now at any cost, and in comes the mindset of building something great from scratch. This move also makes another point very clear. The Texas franchise will have to make tough decisions regarding other high-profile names on the roster. Kyrie Irving, for example, is a genius with the ball in his hands, but his timeline does not match that of a rookie like Flagg. If the goal is to embrace a full rebuild, it makes little sense to keep around the kid a roster full of expensive veterans who are used to competing for a title right away and do not want to go through years of learning and patience. Besides him, other experienced perimeter players become natural candidates to leave, opening space for a younger team aligned with the new project. On Golden State's side, the discussion is more emotional. We are talking about a team that built a recent dynasty, used to seeing the same core write chapter after chapter of glory. Taking a defensive icon out of the roster, someone who was always considered the brain of the defense and its emotional spark, is not simple. The fan base is split. Part of it sees that the peak has already passed and that it is necessary to be cold, thank him for his services, and move on. Another part cannot accept imagining the team without that player who, for his entire career, wore only one jersey in the league. However, the front office knows that, if it wants to give this offensive core one last real shot at fighting at the top, it needs a leap in talent. Imagine a lineup with Curry, Butler, and Davis on the floor at the same time. On one side, one of the greatest shooters in history who drags entire defenses with him just by being on the court. On the other, an aggressive wing who thrives on physical battles, mental toughness, and the ability to decide games in half-court situations. And, closing the trio, a big capable of scoring near the rim, contesting shots, and changing defensive angles. In theory, it is a nightmare for any opponent. But, as always, there is the other side. For this scenario to happen, the Warriors would have to give up depth, defense, and part of their future. Kuminga, for example, is still a project, but a highly valuable one. Draymond, even in physical decline, is still the voice of the defense, the guy who anticipates plays, organizes rotations, yells, points, directs. Without him, the entire defensive system would have to be reinvented. And of course, there is the obvious fear. What if Davis keeps getting hurt? What if, precisely in the moments when this super lineup is most needed, he is out with some physical issue? The Golden State front office, however, is not looking only at this specific trade. Parallel to that, another name has started to circle around in the background, Domantas Sabonis. Yes, the same big man who has been the offensive engine of Sacramento, one of the most complete players in the league when it comes to creating offense from the paint. He scores, rebounds, dishes out assists, and has a feel for the game that fits perfectly in systems based on constant movement of the ball and players. Exactly the type of offense the Warriors have built over the years. Rumors indicate that, after a start to the season below expectations in Sacramento, some executives began to wonder if the time had come to test the market to see Sabonis's real value. And that is where Golden State appears as a potential destination, even with all the limitations imposed by the league's new financial rules for teams that overspend. A deal of that magnitude would almost certainly involve more than two franchises, with an intermediate team helping to balance salaries and assets, receiving draft picks or young prospects in return. One analyst even mentioned a scenario in which an Eastern Conference franchise, known for creatively maneuvering the salary cap, could show up as a third party, absorbing contracts, freeing up space, and facilitating Sabonis's arrival in California. None of this is done, of course. But there is enough smoke for us to understand one thing. The Warriors are indeed on the radar for any big name capable of changing the team's level. And that includes both a physical big like Davis and an offensive maestro like Sabonis. Sabonis, by the way, is living a curious moment. His numbers in Sacramento show a dominant player. He scores efficiently in the paint, controls the boards with impressive rebounding averages, hands out assists worthy of a point guard, and still finds ways to be actively involved in defensive possessions, whether by contesting shots or positioning himself well in help coverage. In terms of offensive fit, it is easy to picture the scene. Curry running off the ball, coming off screens, and receiving pinpoint passes from the big man, who operates at the top of the key like a conductor. The point of concern, however, is the defense. Sabonis is not exactly known for being an elite rim protector. In playoff series, when opponents exploit every weakness to the maximum, that matters. For the Warriors, who for years were used to having a versatile defensive anchor covering mistakes and switching on to virtually every position, this would be a significant shift in identity. It would be necessary to build around him a supporting cast that is quick, aggressive, and extremely disciplined defensively to compensate for possible limitations in specific matchups. To top it off, he was recently sidelined with a knee injury, something that always raises red flags when we are talking about big men. Fortunately, early projections suggest that he should recover before the hottest stretch of the trade period, which keeps his name alive in backstage conversations. Even so, any interested team will weigh this carefully. Is it worth paying a very high price in players and picks for someone who, despite being dominant, is coming off a delicate physical issue? Meanwhile, Golden State keeps flirting with mediocrity in the standing. Not good enough to be an undeniable contender, not bad enough to tear the project down. It is an uncomfortable balance. There are nights when the team looks like the old glory days, with the ball zipping around, shots falling from everywhere, the defense communicating well. On others, the team looks slow, predictable, too dependent on individual flashes. It is precisely in this scenario that blockbuster trades start to gain momentum, because the feeling is that more of the same will not solve anything. And here is where things get really interesting. If the Warriors move in the direction of Davis, does it still make sense to keep feeding conversations about Sabonis? Some believe the two fronts are connected. On one side, a big man more focused on rim protection, imposing himself physically. On the other, a big who thinks the game like a point guard, further enhancing the team's motion-based style. Two different paths to try to answer the same question: how to prolong the competitiveness of a historic core that is, inevitably, approaching its end. Imagine the ripple effect of all this. Dallas completely reshaping its roster, embracing a new, young face as the center of the project. Golden State letting go of a key part of its identity to try to build a new version of itself, heavier, more interior-focused, less dependent on the old formula. Sacramento, in turn, being forced to decide whether it prefers to stick with what it has or cash in now, receiving a generous haul of assets to rebuild around a different structure. These are not just trades. They are statements of intent about the future of the league. And this whole story is still only beginning. The proposal involving Anthony Davis, the interest in Sabonis, the pressure in Dallas, the urgency in Golden State, the uncertainty in Sacramento, all of this forms a chessboard where any move can trigger a chain reaction. And the big question is, who will have the courage to be the first to pull the trigger? When we ask who is going to have the courage to pull the trigger first, it is not just a catchy phrase. It is literally the point where the destinies of three franchises start to intersect. Because none of this happens in a bubble, if Dallas actually decides to flip the switch and send Anthony Davis away, it triggers a chain reaction that hits the Warriors, splashes onto the Kings, and changes the balance of the entire conference. It is as if every behind-the-scenes move were a domino piece knocking into the next one until, down the line, the fan turns on the TV and sees a team completely different from the one they got used to following. From Dallas's point of view, the logic is crystal clear. Either the franchise clings to a project that has already shown deep cracks, or it admits it was wrong and starts over. And when we talk about starting over, it is not just a pretty phrase. It involves hard decisions. Hours and hours of closed-door meetings, meetings between owners, executives, finance people, coaching staff, scouts. Everyone putting the same uncomfortable question on the table. With the current roster, Is it really possible to fight with the West's giants in the coming years? The answer, as painful as it may be, seems to point in the same direction. That is where the Cooper Flag era stops being just talk and becomes a concrete plan. The rookie was not picked to be just another guy. He was brought in to be the gravitational center of everything, and that demands courage. Because building around a kid means accepting that some years might be turbulent, that not everything will work right away, that he will make mistakes, make bad decisions in crunch time, feel the weight of expectations. But at the same time, it means accepting that it is worth paying that price now to reap the rewards down the road when he is mature and ready to lead a truly competitive team. In this context, bringing in Jonathan Kuminga as a partner on that journey is much more than adding an explosive athlete. It is adding someone who has already gone through the school of a team that got used to playing under maximum pressure. He has seen up close what it is like to live in a locker room where every game carries title expectations, where every mistake is broken down in detail, where there is no room for fragile egos. Putting that experience next to Flags can massively accelerate the growth process of the new face of the franchise. It is not just physical talent being added, it is a high-level mindset arriving with him. The veteran big man who would come with him, even in decline, brings something no scout can put into a spreadsheet: voice. In a young roster, someone has to be the guy who steps up, who yells in practice, who shields the rookie when outside pressure starts to become unbearable. He knows the shortcuts of the game. He knows how to read an opponent's offense. He knows at what point in the season the group tends to relax, and when it is time to crank up the intensity. That does not show up in highlights, but it decides destinies. Add to that an elite shooter on the perimeter, capable of punishing any defense that decides to pack the paint to take away Flag's driving lanes or Kuminga's aggression. When you have that kind of specialist on the floor, a whole tactical universe opens up. Pick and roll with the rookie initiating the action, drive and kick, off-ball screens, carousel movements around the arc. The defense is forced to choose its poison. And in a league where spacing is everything, having someone ready to knock down outside shots is almost mandatory. You also cannot underestimate the value of the first-round pick Dallas would be putting in the bag. In a full-on rebuild scenario, every pick becomes ammunition. It can be used to bring in more young talent. It can be included in future trades. It can serve as currency to move up in stronger drafts. The message is clear. The Mavericks would stop being the team that tries to fix everything with big names right away and would become a patient franchise that stacks assets and prepares to turn into a monster in a few years. On the other side, in California, the reasoning follows a different but equally intense path. The Warriors live a kind of paradox. They have a historic star still playing at a high level, another perimeter player who can still decide games on both ends, but they watch the rest of the roster fluctuate too much. They are no longer that steamroller that crushes everyone over 82 games. Today, the team alternates brilliant nights with games where it looks heavy, predictable, reliant on hero ball. Bringing in Anthony Davis would be like pressing the all-in mode button. Next to the legendary point guard and the wing who breathes competitiveness, the center would have the mission of being the missing link. Someone who protects the rim, alters shots, dominates the glass, and, on good nights, still brings offensive punch in the paint. In a playoff series, having that kind of presence in the lane completely changes how the opponent designs its actions. The mere threat of a block changes decisions, forces adjustments in how they attack the basket, makes certain options get abandoned. But no one inside the franchise is naive. Everyone knows that the big question around Davis is his availability. There is no point in building an entire game plan around him if, at the moments of highest pressure, he is on the sidelines. And that is precisely why the internal debate is so intense. Is it worth giving up the emotional heart of the defense, a young project on the rise, depth, and part of the future for someone who can, yes, be dominant, but also carries a long history of absences? While that dilemma is being discussed, Sabonis' name appears as a different but equally tempting alternative. Instead of a classic rim protector, what is on the table is a playmaker from the post. Sabonis is the kind of player who elevates everyone around him. He catches the ball at the top, reads his teammates' movement, calls for cuts to the rim, finds shooters, makes quick decisions. In a system that has always lived off movement, off-ball screens, and extra passes, he seems almost tailor-made. Imagine, for example, a possession where Curry starts in the corner, cuts to the short corner, then curls up towards the top of the key coming off multiple screens while Sabonis holds the ball and picks the exact moment to hit him. The defense goes into panic. If they stick to the point guard, they open space for a drive or a backdoor pass. If they try to double the big man, the ball turns into lightning, finding the open teammate. It is the kind of scenario that makes any offensive-minded coach salivate, but defense once again becomes the question mark. Without a great rim protector and without the veteran who for years was the glue of the defensive system, the Warriors would have to reinvent how they protect the basket. That would demand ultra-disciplined wings, forwards with sharp rotation reads, and an extremely high level of communication. The question becomes, how much defensive security are you willing to sacrifice in the name of an even more fluid offense? This is where everything starts to fit together on a larger scale. Because Dallas's decision to move on from Davis is not just about the big man himself. It is about accepting that the safest path to the future lies in youth, patience, and a lighter roster. Meanwhile, Golden State's decision about whether to chase Davis or aim at Sabonis says a lot about what identity the team wants to have in this final stretch of its era. More physical and rim protection-oriented, or more cerebral, with a big man who thinks the game like a point guard? Sacramento, in turn, enters the equation as that franchise that needs to decide whether it will insist on a project that has stalled or take advantage of the market value of its main big man to reposition itself. When you put the numbers in perspective, you can understand the size of the risk. Sabonis has averages that put him among the greats at his position. He dominates the glass, creates plays, scores efficiently. Letting go of that kind of player is never simple. But if the Kings do not see a real leap in level with what they currently have, maybe this is the moment to sell high and rebuild with a package full of picks and intriguing young pieces. There is also the emotional factor of the fan base. Imagine, for instance, the impact in Dallas of seeing the team embrace a clear path, handing the spotlight to a rookie with absurd upside, surrounded by athletic, hungry players, and without the constant shadow of a failed experiment. The feeling of a fresh start can rekindle the connection with the fans, no longer based on promises of a shortcut to the title, but on a journey they can follow from the very beginning. Watching Cooper Flag grow, stumble, mature, and lead is the kind of narrative that creates a deep bond. In Golden State, the reaction would be more divided. Part of the fan base would welcome the arrival of a star big man as a final battle cry. We're going to try one more time. Another part would feel the weight of seeing pieces leave that had been symbols of identity for so many years. The truth is that there is no painless path when a dynasty begins to transform. Either you cling to the past and risk watching a slow decline, or you make a bold decision that can either put the team back on top or speed up the end. And that is exactly where the comparison between Davis and Sabonis takes on almost philosophical contours. One represents force, intimidation, physical presence, direct impact on defense. The other represents brain, team play, reading of situations, indirect impact that amplifies everything around him. Which of these profiles makes more sense next to one of the greatest shooters in history and a wing used to deciding big games? The answer is not only in the stats, it is in the front office's worldview about what it means to win in today's league. If the Warriors choose Davis, they are embracing the idea that, in big games, protecting the rim and dominating the paint is the top priority, betting that the combination of his physical presence with the talent on the perimeter will be enough to cover possible flaws. If they decide to aim for Sabonis, they are accepting that they will try to beat opponents with an offense that is almost impossible to guard, knowing that in some matchups they may have to win higher-scoring games built on flow and offensive precision. Meanwhile, Dallas watches all of this with a different kind of urgency. The goal there is not just to be competitive again. It is to find a new identity. The team needs to reinvent everything: playing style, roster makeup, long-term messaging, even the way it communicates with its fan base. The arrival of a young, explosive wing, a cerebral veteran, and a specialist shooter creates a foundation that fits organically with a versatile rookie like Flag. From there, the next decisions, such as what to do with other heavy contracts on the roster, become clearer. In the end, when you look at the entire board, you realize these behind-the-scenes talks are not just about isolated pieces. They are about eras. The Anthony Davis era in Dallas, which began as a dream shortcut to the top, seems headed for a bitter but necessary end. The Warriors era, as we know it, is clearly entering its home stretch, and how the franchise chooses to navigate this transition will define whether it says goodbye as a main character or a supporting actor. The Sabonis era in Sacramento may be at the crossroads between doubling down or starting over. And the Cooper Flag era is still just a rough draft, but it is already influencing massive decisions. All of this blends into a single storyline in which every proposed trade, every leaked rumor, every conversation between executives in quiet hallways is silently shaping the future of the league. By the time the fan hears on the news that a deal has been finalized, it will already be the result of weeks and months of tension, calculations, doubts, and bets. And inevitably, someone will look back and say, that was the moment when everything changed. Kai returned to the court with an impressive performance, reaffirming his status as one of the most promising talents in Asian basketball. In a recent game against Kyoto, he delivered a spectacular performance, scoring 20 points, grabbing 4 rebounds, and dishing out 3 assists. These numbers not only stand out in the stats, but also showcase the constant evolution of a player who becomes more complete with each game. From the first minute, it was clear he was ready to shine. Combining height, agility, and technical skills, he dominated the paint, leaving opposing defenders without answers. His mid-range shots were sharp, a reflection of the continuous effort he dedicates to improving his game. Moreover, his court vision became evident in decisive moments, distributing assists and connecting his teammates in important plays. When the game reached its most tense moments, Kai took responsibility, showing leadership and composure. In the third quarter, he made a memorable play by dribbling past 2 defenders, converting a crucial basket, and hitting the free throw after being fouled. Plays like this not only excite the crowd, but also highlight his ability to perform under pressure, a key trait for any player with ambitions of reaching the NBA. His fans have plenty of reasons to be excited. Kai is about to hit historic milestones in the B-League. With just 76 points remaining to reach 1,000 career points, he is approaching a select group of players known for their offensive consistency. Additionally, he has already surpassed 500 rebounds, establishing himself as a dominant presence in the paint on both offense and defense. He not only protects the painted area with authority, but also creates crucial second-chance opportunities for his team. Another important achievement is nearing. He is just 4 assists away from reaching 100 assists in the league. This reinforces his ability to create opportunities and involve his teammates in strategic plays. These numbers directly reflect the impact Kai brings to the court. His combination of imposing physicality, technical ability, and tactical intelligence makes him one of the most complete players in the league. Every point, rebound, and assist brings him closer not only to records but also to the dream of playing in the NBA. His performance has caught the attention of analysts and commentators who already consider him a player capable of raising the competitive level of the B-League. Comparisons with great past big men are starting to emerge, highlighting his potential to leave a legacy in international basketball. But for Kai, more than statistics or records, the important thing is to keep evolving and making his mark in every game. Kai Sotto's future has been one of the most debated topics among fans and experts, and one of the most mentioned destinations for him in the NBA is the Golden State Warriors. The franchise's fans have already started a campaign on social media asking for his signing, believing he could be the missing piece to strengthen the team. The Warriors are known for their fast and dynamic style of play, with an emphasis on long-distance shooting and constant movement. However, one of the team's weak points has been the lack of a dominant presence in the paint, someone who can protect the defensive area, grab rebounds, and bring balance to the team. Kai fits exactly that profile. His impressive height and game-reading ability are characteristics that could transform the Warriors' performance. Moreover, his international experience, facing different styles of basketball around the world, makes him an interesting prospect for a franchise looking to refresh its roster without sacrificing competitiveness. For the Warriors, signing Kai would represent a low-risk, high-potential move. He has already demonstrated his ability to contribute both defensively and offensively, being an efficient finisher near the basket and constantly improving his mid-range shot. Combining this with his competitive mindset and dedication to improvement, he would fit well into the team's system. The fans are excited about this possibility, knowing that players with Kai's skill set and potential are rare. For many, he could be exactly what the team needs to get back to competing for the top spot in the NBA. If you like the content, leave a like to support the channel and subscribe if you haven't already. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss anything about the Warriors. Thanks, and see you in the next video.